Good evening, everyone. My name is Leslie Milano, and I'm the president of the Montgomery County Women's Democratic Club. Thanks so much for being with us today. Here's a little bit about WDC. For more than 60 years, WDC has been a vibrant network of politically active women and men. We are active on the local, state, and national levels, advocating for the increased role of women in our democracy, championing the issues vital to women and children in our state, and working to keep all members of our society engaged and informed. We invite you to join WDC. The dues are low, and we hold many important events just like this, community education forums and speaker events like tonight. So we also have networking events, we have Get Out the Vote campaigns, advocacy, and more. If you're interested in becoming a member, you can visit our website, womensdemocraticclub.org. Here's a list of our committees. If you're interested in getting involved, please get in touch through our website. And here's our executive team. And special thanks to all who brought this event together today, including Barbara Zelenko, Scott Weber, Destiny Drake West, Lisa Maria, Mary Lou Fox, and Diana Conway. This exciting speaker series is one way that WDC engages our community on important topics that need our attention. Recent past speakers listed here have included a list of phenomenal advocates, authors, and public servants. In fact, you may know that Eleanor Roosevelt and First Lady Jill Biden have spoken to our WDC members in the past. We work hard to bring you an impressive list of speakers like Representative Jamie Raskin. Coming soon, we have Dr. Fiona Hill, and she will be with us on February 1st at 12:30. As with all of our programming, the event is free and it's open to the public. Please also save the date for our virtual Annapolis Day, February 26th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. More information coming soon. And save the date for our in-person educational forums when we will host candidates for governor, county executive, and state's attorney. All events are free. You can submit your questions starting now. I'm sure you have many questions for Representative Jamie Raskin. You can do that to the chat participant called Q&A. If you are an elected official, please message me so that we can recognize you prior to the Q&A portion of our event today. And here we go. Tonight's special guest and someone I am thrilled to introduce, my representative, Jamie Raskin. Representative Jamie Raskin was the lead House manager during the second Senate trial of former President Trump, for which he did a stellar job and has since been recognized as the intellectual giant that we in District 8 know him to be. He serves on the Judiciary, House Oversight, House Administration, and Rules Committees. He was a 3-term Maryland State Senator, serving as Senate Majority Whip. He was a professor of constitutional law at American University's Washington College of Law, and the list goes on. We are so grateful to speak with him in this setting tonight. So thank you. Thank you so much, Jamie, for being with us today. And we're excited to hear what you have to say.
Leslie Milano, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. It was embarrassingly effusive and unnecessary for this crowd. These people are all my friends, and you know, these are my base. These are the people who built me, and so I want to encourage anybody who's new to the Women's Democratic Club certainly to join. I've been a member for a long time, and I'm not sure if I paid my dues recently, Leslie, so please have somebody check on that and get back to me. I don't know if that's Lorna Ford's job or Laura Stewart, who that is, Scott Weber, somebody make sure I paid my dues, because I don't remember writing a check recently, but I want to, and I send everybody in your direction whenever I can. In fact, when you know, my book was about to come out after, you know, this nightmarish year we've gone through and everything, and we were getting ready for the book, and Kathleen and I were sitting down to talk to the publisher people, and they were talking about, well, you know, what were the major places we wanted to go, and of course they started with, like, you know, CBS Sunday Morning and Rachel Maddow and the NPR Scott Simon and everything, and I was like, the first place we have to go is the Women's Democratic Club. And then we got to go to Kojo Nnamdi, because I'm a politician who believes you dance with the ones who brung you. And nobody brung me more than the Women's Democratic Club. And I know there are a lot of people on the call who remember, well, not just my first race for the state Senate, but also my first race for Congress back in 2016, which was and remains the most expensive congressional primary in the history of the United States. You know, there were, I think, $15 or $16 million spent. I was outspent 9-1. I was running against some great people, but I had the support of the Women's Democratic Club. Former presidents, I think 8 or 9 of them endorsed me. And that to me was like winning the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary and Jim Clyburn's endorsement in South Carolina. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than that in the 8th congressional district. In any event, look, thank you for so much. Let me just quickly thank you for several things you've done. One, after we lost our precious beloved Tommy, the Women's Democratic Club initiated a speaker series in his name. And I can barely talk about it without choking up, but means so much to Sarah and me and to the girls and to our entire family. So thank you for doing that. And I know we're working on the debut kickoff of the Tommy Raskin speaker series sponsored by the Women's Democratic Club. So thank you for that. Thank you to everybody in the club who participated in helping us launch Tommy Raskin's Memorial Fund, the Tommy Raskin Memorial Fund for People and Animals, which has raised more than, I think it's $1.5 million to put into the causes that were so close to Tommy's heart, including peace and human rights and animal rights and welfare. And it's being run by Hannah and Tabitha Raskin and a group of about a dozen cousins and close friends of Tommy's. And so they're meeting frequently in order to invest that money in the things that were so much in Tommy's mind and in his heart. And, you know, he was a young man who wanted a lot more from democracy, not a lot less from democracy. And he had big dreams for what we could become. And, you know, sometimes I think of Tommy as a messenger from a future 500 years from now, a world that is, you know, beyond so many of the problems that we still deal with in terms of the racism and authoritarianism and war and militarism. And, you know, he said, at a time when we've got Beyond sausages created right here in Montgomery County and Impossible Burgers, we shouldn't be depending on the slaughter of animals for our protein. And it's environmentally the wrong way to go. And ethically, it's the wrong way to go. And so he was a passionate vegan and he converted a lot of people to that. But for him, it was part of his really extraordinary sensitivity to the pain and the suffering of other beings, other people, and then eventually other animals. He came to that too. And that was this just remarkable moral and emotional insight and connection that he had, but also that exposed him to a lot of pain. And he ended up succumbing, as you know, to depression on the last day of 2020. And that's what led to an extraordinary period of 50 days in my life where we lost Tommy. We buried Tommy in Montgomery County at the Garden of Remembrance on January the 5th. And on the very next day, the Constitution calls for the House and the Senate to meet in joint session to count the Electoral College votes. And we had been preparing for months that there would be a series of ambushes and decoy attacks on the majority of 306 that Joe Biden had assembled in the Electoral College. We'd essentially prepared for everything. And I explained in detail in the book what we were imagining and what we were getting ready for. But there was one thing that we were woefully unprepared for, and that was the unleashing of a violent insurrection against the Congress itself, and mob violence overtaking the Congress and shutting down the peaceful transfer of power for the first time in the history of the United States. So in Unthinkable, I describe, what we had gone through over the last week with losing Tommy and how we got to that point, and then what it was like to have Tabitha and our son-in-law Hank, who is married to Hannah, who I know a lot of you guys know too, who eloped with Hannah during the COVID-19 summer of 2020. But we forgave him that whole Elvis Presley wedding thing, and we'll rectify that in the future once we get through the plague here. But anyway, Tabitha was with me, and Hank was with me, and the only staff member I had there was my chief of staff, Julie Tagan, who you guys know. And it's actually an unsung blessing in disguise of that day that we had COVID-19, because if we hadn't, there would have been certainly hundreds, probably thousands more people there in terms of staff, in terms of families, in terms of guests who would have been invited to come and see the peaceful transfer of power. But it was a skeleton crew, and that made it a lot easier for the Capitol Police to protect us all. But in any event, the book tells the story of what happened when first I got up to speak to answer all of the objections that had been coming in against the receipt and counting these electoral college votes. The objections, of course, were absurd and had been definitively and meticulously rejected in 61 federal and state court cases that had been brought by Donald Trump. And those judges, including 8 appointed by Donald Trump himself, nominated to the bench by Donald Trump, every single one of those judges rejected every claim of electoral fraud and electoral corruption. There was literally nothing there. And I don't need to convince you of that, but I just want you to know that we told that to the Republicans. We said everything you are saying has already been rejected in court after weeks and weeks of weighing the evidence and hearing witnesses and so on. And now they just want to get up and say, there's fraud. Let's get rid of Joe Biden's electoral college vote majority. Let's overthrow the election. And of course, we knew what the plan was, because Trump had tried to convince the GOP-controlled legislatures in states like Pennsylvania and Michigan to void out the popular vote and just substitute in pro-Trump electoral college slates. And to their credit, those Republican legislators said that was a bridge too far. They could not just overthrow the popular vote. So then they turned to more than 30 different high-ranking election officials, most prominently Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in Georgia, and tried to persuade them or coax them or coerce them into just finding enough votes, and again, nullifying the popular vote in those states. And in the call with Raffensperger, which was recorded, Donald Trump is famously or infamously heard to say, all I'm looking for is 11,780 votes. Just find me 11,780 votes. That was Donald Trump not trying to stop the steal, not trying to prevent election fraud, but Donald Trump trying to effectuate the steal, trying to accomplish election fraud, trying to organize it right there on the phone with a prominent Republican election official who, again, to his great credit, did his job that day and said, I'm sorry, Mr. President, there's no evidence for what you're saying. These people are feeding you false information and we can't do it. So in any event, it all came down to Mike Pence on that day. Could they get Mike Pence to assert lawless, extra-constitutional, unilateral powers to reject, rebuff, and repudiate electoral college votes coming in from Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, thereby lowering Biden's total from 306 to below 270? And if they could do that, they could toss the whole contest into a so-called contingent election under the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, meaning the House of Representatives would decide. And you ask, well, why would they want Nancy Pelosi's House of Representatives, the Democratic-controlled House, to decide? Well, under the 12th Amendment, we vote not according to one member, one vote, the way we usually vote in legislative votes, but under the 12th Amendment, we vote one state, one vote. And after the 2020 elections, the GOP controlled 27 state delegations in the US House. We control 22, and one state, Pennsylvania, split right down the middle, a tie state, pushed to the sidelines. So even if the at-large representative from Wyoming, the distinguished Representative Liz Cheney, my new best friend in Congress, even had she defected from the GOP coalition, as I think she would have, and not voted with them, still they would have had 26 votes, and they would have moved immediately to a contingent election as called for in the 12th Amendment. They would have run it like the Republican National Convention. I think that they were prepared to take the floor away from whoever was speaking if we wouldn't move immediately to a vote. But in any event, they would have conducted their vote. They would have had 26 votes. They would have declared Donald Trump president for the next 4 years. And I believe that he was prepared to follow the advice of his disgraced former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, who served for 17 days before he was ousted because of lying to Congress and to others about his contacts with the Russian ambassador. But in any event, they were prepared, I think, to follow his advice and invoke the Insurrection Act and thereby trigger something akin to martial law. At that point, Trump would have been happy to call in the National Guard to put down the violent insurrection he had unleashed against us. That was the plan. But when we walked in that day at 1 o'clock on the floor, we were given a memo that Vice President Pence wrote, saying that he had no power to unilaterally nullify electoral college votes from the states. And that's what drove my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle absolutely crazy. Although admittedly, for some of them, that's a pretty short trip. But they went bananas at that point, as did Donald Trump and as did the mob. And of course, Trump began to tweet out his disapproval of what Pence had done. And even when Trump was watching the violence unfolding outside, even when he was watching our windows being smashed in, even after he watched the mob enter the building, even after he watched dozens and dozens of our police officers getting smashed in the face with steel pipes and Confederate battle flags and Trump flags and American flags, even when he saw our officers' lives in danger, even after people were being killed, he continued to tweet against Pence, to say Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what needed to be done. He continued to inflame the mob against his own vice president. And when they tried to barrel into the House of Representatives, a haunting sound I will never, ever forget, when they tried to barrel in, we could hear them chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." And so what I began to see on that day, when finally we all escaped and we were able to get Tabitha and Hank out, and I won't go into that whole story here, but that's in the book if you're interested. But when we were all eventually freed and evacuated, and luckily we left through the right exit of the speaker's lobby rather than the left exit, where the mob was and where the shooting took place and a woman lost her life. When all of that happened, I began to piece together that there were really 3 rings of activity in this sedition that took place on January 6th. There was a mass demonstration called that had some nominal legality to it at the beginning, although it was called for a wild protest by the then president of the United States. And that mass demonstration became a mob riot. And part of what the January 6th Select Committee is doing is telling the story of how a demonstration became a mob riot and helped to injure or wound 150 Capitol officers, Metropolitan Police Department officers, and Montgomery County officers too, more than 50 of whom were there, as well as officers from Virginia and some other places that were deployed, or officers who just decided to show up when they heard about what was happening. Okay, that was the outer ring. The middle ring was the ring of the insurrection. There we found the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the Proud Boys, the militia groups, the QAnon networks, the First Amendment Praetorian, the Aryan Nations, a whole bunch of domestic violent extremist groups who had been carefully recruited and mobilized for the purpose and were training for violence. And so these were the people that started smashing our windows, that launched the violence against the officers, that became the object lesson for the crowd to turn into a mob and to riot against the police. And these were the people who came in with the very express purpose of shutting down the counting of ballots and interfering with the peaceful transfer of power, impeding and obstructing the lawful joint session of Congress to receive the votes that would choose the next president. All right, that wasn't even the scariest ring. The scariest ring was the very inner ring, the ring of the coup. And that's an odd word to use in American political parlance because we don't have a lot of experience with coups in American history. And we think of a coup as something that takes place against a president. This was a coup organized by the president against the vice president and against the Congress of the United States. And the whole purpose was either just to get Pence through various mechanisms to declare Trump the president, to force it into the contingent election, or to turn it into a martial law situation where another option was to get the military just to seize the election machinery across the country, again, something utterly lawless, and then to have a 2-month period for the military to determine who had really won, completely outside of the Constitution. So that we've been able in the January 6th Select Committee to fill in the details of that, but that basically was the map of what was taking place on January the 6th itself. The rest of my book tells the story of, well, I say how Nancy Pelosi threw me a lifeline, because the truth of the matter was, when we got to January the 6th and we got 1 week later to January 13th, when we both impeached the president, and the day before we voted for the first time in American history to try to invoke the 25th Amendment and to appeal to the vice president and the cabinet to meet and to declare the president unable to successfully discharge the powers and duties of office and to transfer the duties to the vice president. When all of that happened, the truth was, in terms of me, speaking subjectively, I was a wreck. I was not eating, I was not sleeping, and I was tormented and tortured by the loss of Tommy. And at that point, I was cross-examining myself for 1,000 judgments and misjudgments that we might have made over the years or months or weeks or days leading up to January 1st or December 31st, 2020. So I was a wreck, but I say that Nancy Pelosi threw me a lifeline because I was floundering, but she said to me that we need you. And I wasn't sure I would ever do anything of meaning or substance with my life again. I really didn't know. When I think back to it and when I look at what I wrote about it, I just didn't recognize the world anymore. And I was surrounded by, so much love in our family and our friends and our political community and my constituents and so much love. But I couldn't recognize the world. I didn't. So anyway, I talk a little bit about that, but she threw me a lifeline because she said, we need you. And I had to rise to the occasion, you know, and so we had to build our team, and we built the most amazing team, a remarkable team of people that represented the extraordinary vitality of America and the diversity of our country and the beauty of our country. And one of my former students was on it, Stacy Plaskett, the first non-voting delegate ever to be on an impeachment team in American history, and a bunch of my colleagues from the Judiciary Committee. But it was a remarkable team, but we had to build a strategy, we had to build a staff, and we had to assemble literally hundreds of thousands of pieces of information that were just flowing in kaleidoscopically from all over the place, because this was a well-documented insurrection. We never had a videotaped insurrection in American history before, you know, and we had to put this stuff together, and we only had a few weeks to do it, and we had to write up the impeachment documents, and I was still working on the 25th Amendment thing because we thought we were in danger. If you remember back to that point, those insurrectionists, those extremists, those white nationalists and racists and fascists left the building. It wasn't like they went into a bunch of paddy wagons on the way out. They went back to Washington and Maryland and Northern Virginia and all over the place. And some of them were calling for completing the job on January the 20th, because Joe and Kamala were being sworn in, you know, 14 days after their insurrection. When they leveled the violence against us on January 6th, the construction workers were outside building the scaffolding for Inauguration Day. They were building it, and the mob got to them and attacked these people and took their hammers and took their screwdrivers and took all their tools as weapons to use, you know, on the entrance to the building against the officers. And I've spoken to some of those people too. That's an untold part of the story. But anyway, we had just several weeks to tell this story the best that we could to America, to get all of our legal arguments lined up, to get all of our factual arguments lined up, and to mobilize it. And you see how the necessity of doing that revived me. And I felt Tommy was in my heart and in my chest the whole time. Tommy was somebody who loved our country. He loved our democracy, and he believed in nonviolence, you know, and everything that happened on January 6th was the opposite of everything that my son believed in. So I was borne along by, you know, by his memory and by his vision and his hopes. And then my hopes for our country and for my constituents. So anyway, I was not planning to get emotional tonight, you guys, but anyway, I don't want to tell any more of the story. You want any more of the story, you read the book, okay? And people in reading the book, I know, I don't want to tell any more of it. I just want to thank you all for, you know, having my back at every turn. You know, I'll say one final thing about it. You know, I'd explained to a lot of the foreign journalists that we had lost with 57 to 43. You know, some of them were saying, how do you feel, you know, having won this great victory? I said, well, you know, 57 to 43 is not a win in a Senate impeachment trial. We've had 4 impeachment trials of a president in US history. Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton, which was ridiculous, as you all know, Trump 1 and Trump 2. So half of all the trials were Trump trials, and the result we had was the most sweeping bipartisan result in the history of presidential impeachment trials, by far. The others have been totally landlocked according to political party, except in the first one, Mitt Romney did break party lines on one count to vote to convict Trump. But everybody was saying that it was going to be the same thing. It was hopeless. It was useless. I tell the story about everybody was telling us, don't do it, and so on. So I believe with all my heart that we convicted him in the court of public opinion. And we convicted him in the eyes of history, and we convicted him in the eyes of the world. And the people say to me, did you really believe all the impeachment managers were saying, Joe Nugas was saying, Raskin really believes we can win. Not only did I believe we could win, I believe we were going to win. And I believe there was a really good chance we were going to win 100-0, because I thought that the factual evidence was so overwhelming, that the legal argumentation was so airtight, and what I was calling the political morality of it was so obvious that there was really no choice, and that the senators would humiliate themselves to try to vote against us. And I thought that the smart Republicans would say, this is our opportunity to get rid of the coward. This is our moment. And the ones who came to see me in our little war room that we had off the Senate floor, which I tried to get people to call the democracy room, but they all called it the war room, left over from the prior impeachment. But when the Republicans would come and see me, I would say to them, you got to do this for America and the Constitution, but you got to do it for your own party too, because he will destroy your party, and he will destroy their party. And I think a lot of them are regretting it now, because the truth in a democracy, which we are, if we continue to fight to be, is a resilient thing. And we're not going to let them bury this in their lies and conspiracy theories and propaganda. That's our job this year. We're going to tell the truth to America. We're going to lay it out for everybody to see. And I got not just the Women's Democratic Club and the Democrats of Montgomery County behind me. We got Liz Cheney on our side. We got Adam Kinzinger. We got a lot of Republicans and independents. We got people across the spectrum who want to tell the truth. So yeah, it would have been nice if we'd had 10 more brave Republicans. It would have been nice if Mitch McConnell had completed that great speech where he said Donald Trump is singularly, morally, ethically, practically responsible for this event. If he had completed it by saying, and I vote to convict, but instead he completed it by saying, and we don't have jurisdiction to try the president because he's not in office, which was a totally bogus legal claim that we had settled on the first day of the trial, you will recall, in a 54-46 vote. It's like a criminal trial. I see Tom Degonia's face right here. It's like a criminal trial where somebody comes in and says the gun was illegally seized in violation of the Fourth Amendment, and the defendant loses on that. Then the judge says, okay, that constitutional claim is gone. You can't raise it anymore. Now we're moving to the facts of the case. And I kept trying to explain to them, they lost that suppression motion. They were saying the defendant was unlawfully before the court of the Senate. Wrong. There had been lots of other impeachments of people who had already left office. And in fact, as the Senate pointed out in the Belknap decision, if you could beat impeachment and conviction just by no longer being in office, everybody would resign right at that moment at which their corruption was exposed, so they could never, pay a price for it. It's ridiculous. But anyway, he hung his hat on that. And that was cowardly. And I just got back from Kentucky with my friend Fiona Hill, who I know is coming to see you guys next week. And we interviewed each other on our books. But it was nice being right there in Mitch McConnell's state and being able to say, that was a cowardly thing to do. That was a chicken way out when he knew what the truth was. And I think he regrets it now. I think he profoundly regrets it. All right, the floor is open because we got 23 more minutes, I think. And I want to hear from my friends.
Perfect. Wow. I'm just speechless that everything that we wanted to ask you covered, plus. And I just want to mention that there are so many people, so many questions here, but so many people who are saying thank you to you, Jamie. We will always need you. Thank you for your brilliance and your passion, your belief in America, democracy, and the value of family. Your arguments were airtight. The arguments were succinct and clear, so clear that everyday Americans could understand, which shows how compelling you are as a teacher as well. There's so many others, so we'll save that chat for you. I want to quickly recognize some of the elected officials here with us today. We have Councilmember Evan Glass. We have from MCDCC, Jennifer Hosey and Trudy Bhatnagar. We have Karen Brito, who's the former chair of MCDCC. We have Lisa Fuller on behalf of Delegate Linda Foley. We have Marley Pasternak on behalf of Senator Ben Cardin. We have Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, a former member of the Planning Board. We have Susie Turnbull, former chair of the Maryland Democratic Party, vice chair of the DNC. And we have Board of Ed member Scott Joftis. If I missed anyone, please let me know. So, you know, I started reading your book. We have a number of questions. I'm going to just ask a few quick questions and go into the questions we have here. I started reading your book, and then a friend of mine on her way to do, she's a surgeon, on her way to do surgery, called and said, I'm listening to I didn't know you did an audiobook immediately. So she said, I'm listening to this audiobook and I can barely get through it and I have to go into surgery right now. It is so devastating, but I can hear the strength in his voice. So I wanted to mention, I'm also listening to the audiobook and I recommend that to everyone as well. It is phenomenal. So one question, you know, I don't think many people realized we were that close to losing our democracy. I don't think that came through loud and clear. It comes through loud and clear in your book. And what
well, people saw the insurrection, but they didn't see the coup. They didn't see the invisible part.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the things you had mentioned, one of the interviews you did was if Mike Pence had gone along with it, it certainly would have happened. And then another time you had said the political scientists tell us that the sign of a successful coup is a recent unsuccessful coup, an event where they can diagram and analyze their previous mistakes so they can correct them the next time around. What are your thoughts there about?
Well, you know, some of my colleagues, I've got a wonderful colleague from New Jersey named Mikey Sherrill, who said she saw some of our most extreme colleagues, you can imagine who they were, leading tours the night before, kind of casing the joint. Well, the ultimate casing of the joint is storming the joint. I mean, they really got to know it now. I mean, they really understand the inside, the underground, the House, the Senate, the chambers, but they've also cased the joint of the Electoral College. And I spent a lot of the time, as you know, I don't know if you've gotten there yet, Leslie, discussing the Electoral College as a kind of haunted house in American politics and American history, and the way that it has its roots in slavery and white supremacy, that it's always been on the side of racism. And we see even today how, you know, the Solid South, although we're making incursions into it, thank you, Georgia, thank you, Virginia, but the Solid South has always been the pivot point for political white supremacy in the country. But anyway, I talk about how the Electoral College, which has this magical ability to turn popular vote losers into presidents, and we've seen it twice in our own century, 5 times in American history, now also has become an actual danger to the Republic. Because if you have a strategic bad actor like Donald Trump, every phase in this arcane, antique process can be transformed into a set of booby traps. I mean, January 6th, the first Wednesday in January, has traditionally been a day of celebration. I mean, Eddie Perlmutter, a colleague who sits next to me in the Rules Committee, said in the old days, people would go and get drunk on the first Wednesday in January. Everybody would celebrate together the peaceful transfer of power. Well, now this day of the counting of the ballots and the role of the vice president, which is supposed to be ministerial and official, but now suddenly people are saying, no, the vice president's got real powers, and you know, the Electoral Count Act, everything is up for grabs. Every piece of this convoluted, obsolescent process has been turned into booby traps to explode against the majority. And, here, my fellow Democrats, I will tell you, and I've told you before a million times, I believe the Democratic Party is the party of democracy. We are standing up for democracy, and we are literally the party defending democratic institutions and elections against an authoritarian insurrectionist pro-coup party. But we're also the party of the vast majority. I mean, Hillary beat him by 3 million votes. Joe Biden beat him by 7.5 million votes. The young people are coming our way. The new Americans are coming our way. We are the party demographically of the majority, but what do they have? Every trick in the book, every trick in the bag, right? The manipulation of the Electoral College, the gerrymandering of our congressional and state legislative districts, voter suppression statutes, the packing of our courts and right-wing judicial activism. That's what we're up against. So it's a race between our ability to organize and defend the majority and hold as many political institutions as we can until we can beat back all of their tricks. And that's why such a high burden of hope was on and remains on Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to do the right thing, because the filibuster has been carved up for more than 100 reasons. The Trade Adjustment Act, the budget reconciliation, judicial nominations, which is how Donald Trump has packed more than 400 unqualified Federalist Society bloggers onto the federal courts. For all these reasons, there's exceptions to the filibuster, but not the most fundamental thing in a democracy, which is the right of the people to vote. This is wrong. And Democrats should not be standing in the way of our doing the right thing.
So we have a lot of questions about the Electoral College. Isn't the best reform of the Electoral College its substitution by direct election of the president? The House passed it once. Why not do it again?
Yes, that is the best solution. Unfortunately, it requires a constitutional amendment, which is 2/3 in the House, 2/3 in the Senate, 3/4 of the states. And that is far from the kind of majorities we've got, as you know. And the Republicans are perfectly well aware of that. I mean, Donald Trump was a huge critic of the Electoral College, who denounced it, said it made us the laughingstock of the world. We had to get rid of it. We had to move to national popular vote for president. And then after the 2016 election, with his discerning eye, he discovered these hidden miraculous properties of the Electoral College, and now he's its biggest champion. But the very first bill I introduced when I was in the state Senate was for a national popular vote interstate compact. And the national popular vote plan, I'm proud to say, is now more than halfway there. These are states that enter into a coalition to say, we will cast our Electoral College votes, not for the winner in our state, but for the winner nationwide, once we have enough votes, electoral votes in the coalition to be determinative every time, once we get to 270. And I think we're somewhere around 183 now. So a lot of states have joined us, but this too has become partisan, and the GOP understands it's a minority party, it's a shrinking minority party, and they thrive on the anti-democratic mechanisms.
Here's 3 questions from 3 different people, but sort of similar. What's the minimum we need to do to protect our democracy in 2022 and 2024 elections? Where should we focus? Which states to bring home the midterms? Not, by the way, every guest that we have, we ask about the midterms, and every guest essentially says it's not looking good. And then how can Democrats increase the number of states they control? So turning enough red states to blue.
Well, the minimum, of course, is we got to win. And I disagree with some of your guests. First of all, it's too early to tell because there's still litigation going on in some important states, including North Carolina and Georgia and Ohio. And we're winning a lot of that litigation, including in North Carolina. And what's interesting is that the Republicans have decided in a lot of states, because there's a clamor from the incumbents, that they're not going to shoot for the moon and try to go for a lot of extra districts because they don't have faith that the demography is with them. They want to fortify the districts they've got. Look at what happened in Texas. They've been building those Republican majorities. They've been building the Democratic majorities, and there's just a handful of new seats. I think one of them looks like it will definitely be Republican, and the other 2 will be up for grabs. So we're going to be able to go and fight for some of them. I mean, they understand how tenuous their hold is because the American people are not with them. They're with us. So what does that mean? We need to go out and register every single person and get every person out to vote in every place. And we cannot surrender any county, any precinct, any city or town, anywhere. That's our job. And if we can hold the House and or the Senate, then we will be able to prevent the worst of the damage. If we can expand our majorities, we can complete the program that we want, not just the magnificent infrastructure program that we got done, that Donald Trump and his cronies talked about, but they never even put any bill out there because they weren't really interested in doing anything, but also Build Back Better, which we know is so necessary. The universal pre-K for 3-year-old and 4-year-old kids, continuing the child care tax credit, which has cut child poverty in half. We did that. We Democrats did that. So we're proving that we can make democracy work. So that's what we need to do. And I don't want to get into specific states now because that is a little premature because it's still unsettled and we're not sure about all the districts. But believe me, I will be back in touch with everybody. My Democracy Summer project, which has become such a fantastic success because of you, because of my monthly Mavericks, but because of the strength you guys have given me, is now a nationwide program. And we have signed up now more than 50 Democratic members of Congress to do Democracy Summer in their districts. And we're expecting another dozen or two to sign up over the next couple of weeks. And then we're going to be taking that around the country. And we'll channel our money into those swing districts and channel our energy into helping make sure we win in Georgia and win in North Carolina and win in Virginia, because some of those, districts are now much more slippery than they were before. Like Elaine Lurie's.
Democracy Summer, if you haven't already heard about Democracy Summer or looked it up, please Google, and we'll have some information available for you too. It's such a phenomenal program. And I remember you talking about a long time ago when you just started it, and it's grown so well. So thanks so much for all of your work there. Another question here. Do you foresee, either with Letitia James's work in New York City or with your own work with the January 6th insurrection investigation, that Trump will actually be prosecuted with one or more charges serious enough to knock him out of the 2024 election? And some people also say to go to jail. I mean, so is he going? What's going to happen here? Democrats want to know.
I happen to believe that will happen. Because I believe Dr. King when he said that the arc of justice or the arc of the world is long, but it bends towards justice. I think it's going to come back around for him. And I know it's maddening and infuriating for people that this guy is like a walking crime wave who's committed dozens and dozens of crimes and torts. And you can go online and find thousands of cases he's involved in because he doesn't pay the carpenters or the plumbers or the painters, the small business contractors. I mean, it's just, this con game has gone on for too long. And I think that the bank fraud, the real estate fraud in New York, I think it's going to come back to haunt him. I think the attempt to commit election fraud in Georgia is going to come back to haunt him. And we're going to get the truth out. But what I want to tell you about the January 6th Select Committee is that we obviously support individual accountability in that sense when we're thinking about the criminal justice model, that if people commit crimes, they should be prosecuted. But our committee is about collective accountability for these crimes against democracy. What are we going to do to fortify our democratic institutions? As long as we have the Electoral College, how do we make it work so the popular vote in the states is respected and not replaced and corrupted and perverted, right? And how do we get rid of the Electoral College so we elect the president the way we elect governors and U.S. senators and mayors, right? Because that's going to be the only real safety, the rule of the people. I mean, I'm with John Dewey all the way, which is the only solution to the ills of democracy is more democracy. And the flaws that are blowing up in our face right now are not because of democracy, they're because of the imperfections of our system, the anti-democratic instruments that were built into the original Constitution. But if you read the Constitution from front to back, you will know that it is a chronicle of the trajectory of democratic expansion and inclusion. And we got rid of slavery, that affront and insult to humanity and to democracy. And the 15th Amendment said you can't discriminate in voting based on race. And the 17th Amendment got rid of state legislators selecting US senators and said the people will select the senators. And the 19th Amendment doubled the electorate by ending the disenfranchisement of women. And the 23rd Amendment said people down the street in DC could participate at least in presidential elections. And the 24th Amendment got rid of poll taxes. And the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18. Our whole Constitution is about opening up the democracy. And Tocqueville said that democracy is always either shrinking and shriveling away, or it's expanding and it's growing. And we've been in a contractionary, shrinking phase under Donald Trump, all to the point of almost being in a coup or an insurrection. We've got to get through that. We've got to recognize and acknowledge people's trauma, and we got to fight for democratic expansion and growth. And that means statehood for DC, and it means statehood for Puerto Rico, and it means get rid of the Electoral College, and let's have a popular vote for the President of the United States, and let's guarantee voting rights with the Voting Rights Act. Let's amend the Constitution to have a constitutional right to vote, which we don't even have in the Constitution. We've just got anti-discrimination amendments. So we've got a democracy to win, and you know why? Because we've got a species to save, because we're not going to be able to save ourselves, to save humanity from climate change if we're dealing with the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and Donald Trump. We need our democratic government to work. So you see, we got to move forward, and that's got to be our message to people in 2022 and 2024. And you know what's on the ballot in 2022? 2024 is on the ballot. Who's going to be controlling Congress when we get together for the January 6th of 2024, that first Wednesday in January, whatever day that is? Who's going to be sitting there? Who's going to decide the objections and so on? That's a profound problem. I want everybody to think about that.
We are so, listening to you, it's so engaging, and I'm ready. I'm listening. I'm like, okay, these are the things that we're going to do with WDC. We're going to get out there. We have Trudy in the chat saying we need, MCDCC needs people. And at the same time, it is so overwhelming. It is so overwhelming. So well, let me say this. It's overwhelming if you think it's your job alone. It's certainly overwhelming to me if I think it's my job alone. But I got you guys, you got me, we've all got each other. And some of these young people say, well, I'm feeling burned out. I'm like, you know what? We don't have time to get burned out. If you want to take the weekend off and go to the beach, take the weekend off and go to the beach, and we'll take care of it while you're gone. And then you'll be there for somebody else when they go away. This is a collective endeavor. We're going to take care of our democracy together. Absolutely. Let me ask you a couple of other quick questions. We're coming up on our time, but if you just have a couple more minutes, we'll just go through some of these. One on the two questions on the Voting Rights Act. So one person said, what's next for voting rights? What are the odds that the bipartisan bill to fix the Electoral Count Act can also include at least some basics from the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act? And then we have another that says, why not disaggregate the various parts of the voting bill and introduce the parts as discrete, easy to explain, and justify those bills? Then if the Republicans want to vote against them, our Democratic candidates will have specific negatives to bring up against their Republican opponents.
Well, I mean, it's a nice point, and we might end up having to do that. But that's a strategy, of course, not for victory, but for losing and then advertising where the Republicans are on it. But the fact is, everybody knows where the Republicans are on it. I mean, we can tease them out further on particular things, but they've embraced their destiny as the anti-democracy party. They've gone from Abraham Lincoln's party to Donald Trump's party. And in fact, they're not even really a modern political party. They're an authoritarian religious cult of personality subject to one guy. And I've told members on the floor, I've said, when all of this is over, you guys are going to be fit for nothing other than selling flowers and incense at Dulles Airport, and you're going to be sleeping on the ground listening to Donald Trump tapes. I mean, that's what they've done to themselves. And this is Abraham Lincoln's party. I mean, what a come down. What a destruction. So we can try that, but look, the reality is maybe we could get Manchin and Sinema to change their mind on the filibuster. Of course, they support us on the substantive voting rights legislation, so I will grant them that. They do support us on that, but they're not willing to do what needs to be done with the filibuster to make it real. And we need to organize. I think we've got to get over at this point the dream that we're going to be able to pass this voting rights legislation. Maybe Schumer can pull a rabbit out of the hat with Pelosi. Maybe not. Our job, start organizing right now. Let's get everybody registered to vote. And I want us to win everything. We got to win back the state house, the state senate, the governorship. What we've learned in this process is every single office counts. The Secretary of State, incredibly important. The election boards, the election commissions, everything is important. Now, WDC understands that. But like, now is not the time for somebody to show how bipartisan or how magnanimous they are by voting for, you name it, somebody, so they can say, well, yes, my great uncle was a Republican, so I'm going to vote for so and so to show how big-hearted I am. We're up against a party that is willing to see the destruction of our form of government, and I saw it with my own eyes. And they continue to lie about it. And Donald Trump says that his supporters were greeting the police officers with hugs and kisses, he said. And they liken it to a return of Dr. King's March on Washington. What kind of blasphemy is that? What kind of desecration is that? The civilizing movements of our time, the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the labor movement, the environmental movement, the LGBTQ movement, would never, ever have done anything that those barbarians did to us on January 6th. And our people, when they felt they had to break the law to make progress for the country, put their hands out like this and submitted to arrest and committed civil disobedience. I was at the Muhammad Ali Center with Lonnie Ali, with Muhammad Ali's wife, last night, an extraordinary woman. And we talked about this. And Muhammad Ali said, I'm not going to participate in that unjust, illegal war, and you do with me as you please. He didn't say, I'm going to go and beat up some police officers. And he could have taken out any of our officers with one punch. But he was fighting for justice. He's fighting for peace and civil rights. These people are fighting to turn the clock back on everything. Trump just endorsed Orban for president in Hungary, who's running openly anti-Semitic campaigns against George Soros. So there's a party that is in league with every right-wing authoritarian government, regime, and movement on earth. I mean, that's Steve Bannon's dream. He's like a Batman villain who wants to organize all of the alt-right fascist parties all over the world under his tutelage. So the question that I ask you is the question you got to ask Montgomery County, we got to ask Maryland. Are we going to lie down and let Donald Trump and Steve Bannon and Dinesh D'Souza and Michael Flynn destroy everything that the civilizing movements of American history have built so they can take America off in the direction of right-wing authoritarianism? Are we going to lie down and let them do that? I don't think we're going to. We're going to fight because we are the party of democracy and we got a lot to stand for. And by the way, these days, I think I've told you this before, but I say it to the Republicans all the time now. When they call me a liberal, I say, you're damn right I'm a liberal. The heart of that word is liberty. And that's got to be the central construct of what we're fighting for. But I'm a progressive because the heart of that word is progress. And if we're not making progress, we shouldn't be in politics. But these days, my favorite thing to call myself is a conservative because I want to conserve the land, the air, the water, the climate system, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the National Labor Relations Act, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, you name it. Everything that they want to destroy is what we want to conserve. And the only thing that makes them conservative is they want to conserve their own wealth and power. And that's not enough for an honorable intellectual tradition, which doesn't happen to be my own, but it's not enough. And so these days, we're speaking for all civilization. We're standing up for the whole thing against a destructive, authoritarian, nihilist cult. And I think I've got to go do some campaigning with some people who need to hear me a lot more than you guys do. You guys have been listening to me for way too long. Thank you all for coming. I'm sending you all my love. Thank you for these beautiful comments. I hope, so Leslie, you can save them for me and send them all to me.
We
so
can, we definitely can. We just want to say thank you so much to Jamie Raskin. We see your brilliance and your strength, and we thank you so much for choosing to apply your talents to public service and for leading the fight to save the democracy truly of the United States of America. And we don't actually usually do this, but I'm going to ask everybody to unmute and just give our congressman a round of applause.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Jamie.
Bravo,
Bravo. Thank you, Jamie.
Bravo.
Thank you.
And Tom, Jamie.
Awesome.
I gotta go. I love all you guys. I'll see you soon.
Need you.
Everything, Jamie.
Stay where you are. We
Really
need
need to finish my book, all right? Give me a text.
Coordinated travel across the country. Enter
Well, thanks so much.
Equip themselves with a variety of
So I'm gonna go back to having everyone mute, and then we're just gonna finish up this amazing conversation here. Thank you so much. If you're not already muted, please do. Just a few.
What's that noise?
Can mute, that would be great. Let's see, I'm just gonna mute a couple more people here. Going back to muting. Here we go. Okay. Thank you so much. Wow. Jamie Raskin is such a national treasure, and it is amazing to have him as our representative and to just get to know him so well. There's so much more to say, but thank you. This is going to be recorded. This has been recorded. It's going to be sent out. So if you'd like to send this recording to friends of yours so they can hear directly from Jamie, that would be great. We do have a few other announcements as we are ending. So you can purchase the hard copy book at Politics and Prose on their website and get a special discount. And bonus, you will get, if you are one of the first, I don't know how many, there's several cartons of books there that are signed by Jamie. And so if you put this special 10 code in the checkout for Politics and Prose, then you will receive one of those signed books as they are still available. I also highly recommend the audiobook as well. Coming up next, we have Dr. Fiona Hill, and she's going to be with us on Tuesday, February 1st at 12:30 p.m. Her talk is titled Saving Our Democracy by a conversation that we had with her. February 1st, 12:30, and you can sign up on our website. And we have virtual Annapolis Day as well coming up February 26th, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. You can also sign up very shortly on our website. It's members only event, so you have to join or renew now on our website again. And last but not least, if you have not become a member already, please do. We're in our membership drive, and we would love to have you either join or renew. Thank you so much, everyone. What an exhilarating night. It has been wonderful to have so many people here with us today. Thanks so much, and have a great night.
Great job.
Well done. Thank you, everyone.
Really great. Thank you so much.
Nowhere to go but
Great.
down, Leslie.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
everyone. Great job.
Great job, Leslie.
Thanks so much.
Good job.
Say 126.
you'd like to put something in the chat to Jamie, we will send him the chat, and then you can be assured that he will see it. We also have here on the screen the Tommy Raskin Memorial Fund for people and animals. And one of the things I didn't get to mention is that WDC has launched a Tommy Raskin annual speaker series, and we will be looking to do our first speaker in the summer. So look out for that as well. Thanks again, everyone.